Excellent. Okay. How is the audio? Sounds good. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce folks here. I'm Kevin Petrie. I run the research group at Eckerson Group. We're a boutique data and analytics consulting and research firm. We're virtual, based largely in New England. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to introduce some experts today. Shane Murray is a field CTO with Monte Carlo. He's the former SVP of Data and Analytics at the New York Times. He describes himself as somewhere between a data scientist and a data analyst, a systems thinker that knows how to apply experiment design and statistics to product problems. So Shane is going to spend some time interviewing and speaking with Andy Owens, who is VP of Analytics and Data Engineering at Kargo. He'll tell you a little bit more about that company and the problem that they were looking to solve. Andy has 10 years in ad tech, leading teams to address ad tech opportunities and problems. Like me, Andy is an avid cyclist. He's embracing the term gravel cycling, which I need to, I think, start to embrace and acknowledge that I'm not really a hardcore mountain biker. But it's good to have things in common with both these guys, and I'll hand over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And maybe I'll just start by saying Monte Carlo, in case you don't know, is the leading data observability company. We focus on providing a software solution that allows you to detect, resolve, and prevent data incidents at scale across your end-to-end cloud ecosystem. Andy, as mentioned, is from Kargo. Thanks for joining us today, Andy.
Of course.
And maybe if you could start by introducing yourself and talk a little bit about Kargo and the problems you solve with data there.
Yeah, of course. Formerly trained as economics undergrad, but got into data very quickly, consulting and Accenture, something we shared. I think I jumped into the media space at a great time. Worked across media gaming companies, digital publishers, and ad tech companies. So currently, I'm over at Kargo managing the data engineering and analytics teams. We've scaled quite a bit. Just background on kind of where Kargo started. I think, way back in 2013, we were doing, ringtones, right? I think we all remember those Nokia days. Times have changed. Kargo really, I think, until probably about 2020 was known as a mobile-first advertising company. So those ads which pop up on the bottom of your screen, sorry for those who don't like them. But we are high impact and work with some of the biggest, I would say, companies in the US who are doing at-scale brand advertising. Where we are now, and I think the real meat of what we're going to talk about today is our expansion into an omnichannel platform. So we went from mobile, we had a bunch of acquisitions and internal products built, and now we're across CTV, we're across the social platforms, providing products which scale all of those.
Very nice. And maybe if you could then go from there into just walking us through what have been your objectives over this time. I think in the write-up you've had 5 acquisitions or so in the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
How have you thought about scaling that data platform for Kargo and what your objectives are over that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think like anybody or any company that's grown really quickly, I'd say at first we had a lot of learning to do. I think just in like our acquisition cycle and thinking about the maturity of how we set out integration plans and even assess companies, we previously, I think we're like jumping on market opportunities, maybe not focusing on tech. And now that we've been through 5, we're actively reviewing like AWS logs, entity relationship diagrams before we ever even talk to the company, right, and talk about financials. So a lot of the pre-acquisition side has changed. But I think in terms of observability, right, everybody's in-house. We're building more and more products and acquiring more. The focus has really been on, okay, get all the engineering teams who are part of the data collection, warehousing, processing, and reporting layers and other tech that's built on that together in focused groups. Some of these projects, extend years out into the future, right? I think our roadmap for our most recent acquisition is about 18 to 24 months, and we knew that buying them, right? So a lot of focus on making sure, okay, cool, you guys have an Athena stream, right, or an Athena warehouse. We're going to make sure that that's going to be in Snowflake in 6 months or 9 months.
Got it. And maybe if you could just give us some context then on what the stack looks like for Kargo and how that's evolved.
Yeah, absolutely, and make sure you guys are in here in our orchestration layer. But I think the majority of our data actually comes from the upper left here. So our media auctions, where we're actually bidding on users who are on a site, those are like billions of transactions an hour. An example of one of our tables that is 1% sample of that traffic is about a terabyte a day. So we can't even ingest all the data that we actually transact on. That upper left is maybe 1,000x versus the other types of acquisitions we've had. So that's just to be in the space of bidding on the ads you're seeing on maybe Pluto TV or Hulu or something. The other applications which we have are both a combination of in-house back-end systems, which are powering applications to help people transact their media, right? They want to set up a campaign, they want to buy for 30 days, and they want to collect that data. We also have a lot of third-party integrations to just make this all work. People want to verify that the ad that they paid for is actually a legit ad and not fraud. So we have a lot of brand safety partners in here. All of that is kind of connected through our orchestration layer. So we use Apache Airflow as our main job scheduler and orchestration tool. We also have Nexla as kind of like a data ops tool to quickly connect to these third-party APIs and basic S3 and GCS buckets, things like that, to pull in our data. And then lastly, Monte Carlo kind of sits in here, kind of looking at all those operations, helping us identify issues that are in the main tables that go into Snowflake, as well as in kind of these upstream feeds, which help us blend all of this data together for a cohesive client reporting, targeting, and machine learning models, which transact back through the auctions.
There's a lot in there.
Yes.
Given you're an ad tech company, the variety, the volume, velocity of data, it's probably very different data sources coming in here. Are they choices you made to kind of optimize the stack for those different use cases?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were talking about just in the data collection layer, right? Just sampling earlier, I mentioned. That just gets us down to a reasonable data set to deal with every day from one of the bid streams. But I think we really decided to centralize. I think when we first started with some of the acquisitions and building tools, everyone was like, oh, hey, this app team wants to use BigQuery, or hey, we want to stay on Redshift. And we just saw very quickly over time that we had to consolidate into one warehouse and build a set of tooling, right, on top of that we could scale out. So building code libraries that work with Airflow, knowing that immediately when we set off Airflow jobs, right, to manage orchestration, we need Monte Carlo in there, understanding, has the profile of our data changed and how we can maintain alerting for that.
Got it. And so onto data governance, I'd be interested, data governance tends to mean a lot of different things to different data teams, but how do you think of data governance at Kargo, and sort of what made it become a priority for you in the last year or so?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think one of the challenges of being kind of acquisition driven and building up these many product suites is you have common just taxonomy misunderstandings, right? So an impression of an ad on Facebook is not the same as an impression of an ad on your CTV device or a mobile app. So just making sure everyone's talking a common language, and hey, if something's from Facebook, it's Facebook _ impression, right? Or CTV _ impression. Just some of that basic nomenclature is important. But I think a lot of the drive that drove this the source of this centralization came from an incident which happened in 2021 where one of our main pipelines kind of failed, and it wasn't due to our dev teams. It was kind of an external partner kind of stopped feeding us the right information for us to process all this data. And I think over a 3-day period, it was like a $500,000 problem, right? So we were like, ooh, hey, we have some budget to solve this, right? And we have to address these kind of things as we scale. Seeing double-digit growth every year with our volume of data and just what the business is doing, that $500,000 cost then is, if that same incident happened today, it would be much, much larger.
Yeah, it's interesting how often the combination of valuable data products plus highly visible incident results in we need to do something about data quality here.
Right.
So onto that journey then, you started looking at data observability solutions and started working with Monte Carlo. How did that come about, and how did you sort of make that decision about data observability?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think we knew we had a problem. Obviously, we were spread across many warehouses at that time, and the centralization into one was a big part of that. And we wanted to be able to give the data engineers, a focused area and a framework in which they could just set up alerting, so that not only could they QA their own work, right? If they're making changes, they see problems as they occur, but also for the upstream teams. If we see those kind of similar outages as we had previously seen, developers can address them really fast. And yeah.
Yeah, I guess how do you think about the rollout of Monte Carlo within and the rollout of observability within Kargo? Is it kind of centrally managed across the platform team? How are you thinking about the different acquisitions that you've made and their kind of accountability for data reliability in that function?
Yeah, good question. I think with any stakeholder group, right? Each one of these applications ultimately end up at a stakeholder, right? So a product owner, sometimes a GM of one of our businesses, a specific sales team, right? And with that comes like specific KPI they're interested in and they need to monitor, which all goes back to some upstream flow or an application. So we tried to focus on, okay, what are the biggest, transactional areas, right? We know the big one. We already knew the big one. And then we just kind of made a prioritized list and then worked with each team to make sure that every time they were, adding, new connection sources, they knew to add in, it really actually flows through like Slack alerts to their specific dev teams so that, okay, applications focused on CTV go right to the CTV developers and to the CTV, basically campaign managers who have to execute on the volume transacted. So it was really, I think, functionally focused, and we prioritized that based on, the revenue.
Yeah, and can you tell me a bit about like the impact or the results you're seeing from it, whether it's save time, save money, better trust? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that one of the most obvious things to us, which we didn't observe at the time, this was not observable to our organization, but we had a developer, break the rules and release something on a Friday afternoon, and basically like 3 hours later, he reverted the code. And on Monday, everybody was like, "What happened? Like, how did you know to turn this off?" And he was like, "Oh, like I just saw, transaction volumes just tanking, and it happened in our hour-over-hour data." So he knew that, hey, this was an explicit problem. And I think previously our dev teams kind of didn't know that they could take ownership and actually see the business impact, right? They were just like, "Hey, I shipped it. This is QA and data engineering and the business's problem, right, to deal with whatever might have happened." And that's kind of shifted. And they've taken ownership of, doing fixes based on the alerting that we've given them. So that problem probably would have been a $20,000 a day problem.
Yeah. And I find that sort of visibility from developer down to see kind of the blast radius of what they're capable of is such a compelling reason to act in advance, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think going back to that like 2021 challenge we had, right? We were really flying blind in that instance, and the developer teams didn't know quite where to go investigate, right? Our data engineering teams were trying to Humpty Dumpty back reporting to fix all the the jobs to make sure the clients and the machine learning teams were happy, and all of that was a huge waste of time, right? That was time off of building and scaling our systems to make us more efficient. So these small kind of cuts, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts with these transactions, and if you can make something go from 1 in 100 incidents to 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000, that's real opportunity gains for the company.
Yeah, very nice. So maybe switching then to forward thinking, what are you thinking in terms of both data governance priorities, but also broader data priorities for your team at Kargo?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, these integrations with our acquisitions are years long, right? So we are obviously pulling them all in, and then we've really gotten to the point now where we're I think moving a little bit from the machine learning and reporting systems, which were just scaling us internally, to actually building like data products, which are going out to market to allow people to really target folks across any of these platforms. So we've actually come out with something recently where if somebody's actually watching a specific show, we can actually retarget them with very similar ads within like a minute or two on their mobile device or their desktop if we use the right data partner. So that was previously unheard of, and we can focus a little less maybe on some of these backbone systems and actually bring things out and monitor those products.
And it sounds like, just to probe on that, it sounds like machine learning kind of almost operates like a platform team for the organization. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, their outputs are running products which determine our margin and products which are out in front of our clients and helping us compete. So.
Yeah. So one more question from me, and then we'll go to the audience. But any tips for folks out there that are starting to look at data quality, data reliability? What would be the one thing you'd suggest?
Definitely call Shane. I think that's the first step. So he's on LinkedIn. You can find him fast. No, I think probably just getting your engineering teams together. Obviously, the big incident that we had was like a major retro, right? We had like 15 engineers in a room, a bunch of people from the functional side of the business, and we're like, all right, where were all the pain points in this, right? What could we have done better? And have one of those working sessions with your teams and identify the immediate problems and try and go through a prioritization exercise to focus your efforts. I think you have to do that. Otherwise, as I mentioned, like it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like what you're trading off a 1 in 100 today, if your company is growing, that 1% is actually much worse down the line. So,
thank you. I think we'll go to the audience now. Any questions out there?
Hi, thank you. Any specific data domains in your business where data reliability was uniquely different from domain to domain? Like, is this a view of maybe one group of data sets that fit within a domain, or because I'm wondering how we would do a similar thing with so many domains.
Yeah, I mean. Sorry, who's we?
Chris.
Chris. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we really again did like a prioritization focus. So each of those applications are actually like a different revenue stream for us. So it was just really easy to focus that way. And then we looked at like the highest transactional data sets within that. And then I think after that we looked at, okay, where were the most like aggregates and downstream reporting and modeled products built off of. So profiling our usage of the data, we were actually able to segregate like, oh, hey, we have to look at the transactional data sets because that's really what's fueling a lot. And then segregating that from reporting and other products. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does make sense. Thank you. I didn't say the question very well, so the answer was helpful. Okay. The question I probably should have specified is when you're defining data reliability, especially across a large group of data sets, we like the key attributes that define when it's reliable, when it's available, when it's publishable. Did that significantly change, when the core semantics, the data itself changes, like from product to HR to, whatever, public data, where, like I'm kind of imagining what would define data reliability across HR data and product data.
Right.
The highest revenue versus the lowest revenue, stuff like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Because I think right with the variety of data, our bidstream data is like all JSON blobs. Sometimes we don't know what to expect. It can be, if there's a new offering in the market and we just start accepting that data, we actually start getting alerts, right? And it's like, hey, there's a new field, or like there's new key values, and a huge dictionary came in. Like, what's going on there versus our ERP or like NetSuite, right, which is just running transactional tables. So I think each of those has been focused, right? Like there's different types of things we can look at within JSON objects versus maybe like that standard like entity relationship in a production app. When we've actually looked at those, I think we've looked at least the production apps in much more of a almost like a QA engineer would look at them, right? So it's like, well, we expect the ID to be this many digits, or this length, and we expect this exact cardinality based on our product offering in these 5 other columns, right? So assigning engineers and like a QA person from the upstream collection layer to actually like ruthlessly look through those, you can make much better use of these kind of alerting tools.
I'll just add another point there. I think often we do start in a platform team and then go out into domains and look at specific data products. And there's 2 things. One is often companies will look at those data products and almost tier them on the levels of uptime or the levels of service that you need. So it might be that you have either a higher uptime, you mentioned 2 nines or 3 nines of uptime, right, that you're thinking about for a certain data product, or a smaller time to resolve incidents as the standard. So the standards get higher depending on the type of data product, but also the type of SLOs or checks that you're doing. So if it's a financial data product, it might be the accuracy versus the general ledger, right, and very specific checks that are part of that SLA. And if it's a machine learning product, it might be more about the consistency of the data that you're looking at and less about, really fine-grained accuracy.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it. We have a lot of third parties that we're measured against by our clients. So that was one of those things. That was the bread and butter kind of aggregate far downstream of our transactional data. And we're like, okay, from here to here, everything's got to be really tight because we bill off this last number.
Thanks.
Hi, Bhavesh. I've got a question about when you talk about your machine learning models. Can you talk to me in the context of data reliability? How have you ensured model drift and bias is looked at?
Yeah, I think we do look a lot at that. Our main machine learning models are actually built on, I would say, like a small cardinality of data. So like we don't actually have too many columns, and there's not n kind of to the infinity values which are going in. So we maintain kind of like within like a Redis cache, a ton of mapping tables to each of those values. So one of the things we are constantly monitoring is actually the match rate, right? We want that to be 99.999, right? Or perfect every day. So with those kind of huge data streams coming in JSON, that has to be really, really tight. So the moment there's a deviation, we know that the model will immediately become biased, right? Because it's going to start seeing huge anomalies and making poor decisions. So does that? Is that a manual effort? I think pointing Monte Carlo or our other kind of internal profiling, libraries at it, actually isn't huge. It's kind of just like, hey, go select those tables, go select those files, and make sure that they are actually showing the numbers we would expect. So honestly, I think maybe a sprint's worth of work. Yeah.
Yeah, Kiran from Sanofi. So my question is, who do you see as the main users for this platform, and what do you see as a synergy between this and a traditional data quality platform that you may have in-house?
Yeah, I think from maybe like sponsor or stakeholder level, right? Obviously, there's like CTO, right? He's got many engineering teams that he wants to see this reliability, and I think this kind of intervention analysis may be a good term for how I've been referring to what the engineers are doing, right? Like they do a deployment, it's at a specific time frame. We want to see hour over hour, day over day to that period. They're, I think, the real customers of it, right? And then, I think the data engineering team underneath those application engineers or downstream of them, they're the ones who are actually probably going to be doing the work in response to maybe these changes. So there's, whatever's got to be changed in the application layer to fix or revert a problem, or, hey, there's a whole new data set coming in or a new field. We actually have to make updates to the product. That stuff gets passed down to the data engineers. So if that kind of makes sense of like who's targeted.
It does. Okay. Not much on the governance side, though. You don't see any governance involved in that?
I think with specific to the alerting side, or reliability side, those are the main customers. I mean, governance, obviously downstream, a lot of this ends up impacting client campaigns directly through our data products that are, machine learning models built upon this data and the reporting, right? So, if there's an incident that's out for 3 days, hey, we can't tell the client how many video completes they got, right? Or how many clicks they ended up with. And for that, that can be a real reputational problem. We know in the market some folks have, lost market share because of major issues like that in their engineering stack.
And I'd just say governance are sometimes a sponsor of the initiative, but often they're a stakeholder and partner on kind of the accountability model, especially across large organizations where you've got maybe a decentralized rollout according to domains. But as Andy said, it's very often the primary user base is the engineer. And then you'll bring in domain expertise potentially from analysts and data scientists that are part of solving that problem.
Maybe one more question. Anybody else? Nope.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, great. This actually builds on a conversation we were having before the talk. There's a lot of evidence that a lot of companies are looking to build their own language models, train them on their own data. Are you looking at doing that? And if so, how are you addressing data quality as it relates to training data for that?
Good question. We actually, so obviously Snowflake is a huge partner of ours. We built our whole warehouse off of them. And when we had their solution kind of team in our office the other week, they're like, hey, we're going to build this text to query approach where any user could just type in, hey, I want to see this many impressions and that showed in Chicago for iOS devices, right? And the query would just construct itself. And we were like, cool, that sounds interesting. What is it like? What's it using? What's it based on? And it's like, oh, that's actually built on the description of your data sets. And we're like, ooh, all right, that's going to be a lot of work just to make sure that thing works, right? So, I think those tools are awesome, but they're only going to be as practical as your own descriptions of your data and explanation of the nuances in each table. If you can't understand those, I don't think you're going to get the results truly that are going to be awesome. You'll probably get 80% of the work done. But.
Good. I'd be interested to hear how it goes.
Yeah. Thanks.
You gonna write that up, Kevin? Yes.
No, I meant a real use case at some point. Like, you got to have the metadata right on all those things for the LLM to do the query.
Yeah. So Dan's putting me on the spot. I'm writing a research report about building LLMs, and I think that data quality is going to be critical to curate and handle the training data. So perhaps we could chat more about that.
Yeah, of course.
I think like the instances we're seeing right now are that sort of BI shortcut, text to query, and then also some people looking at data modeling. But either way, you're going to need some quality checks, some observability on that system. So I think it's a good opportunity for us that we're seeing in the market.
Definitely agree with that. Good. So I think we're all set. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.